How did a poor mother in torn shoes strip a police officer of her badge in just 30 minutes? Inside Detroit's stuffy, coffee-scented 15th precinct, Gabrielle Foster holds her autistic son, trying to turn in alibi papers for her neighbor. But Officer Diana Lopez knocks her blue plastic folder to the dirty floor with a baton and threatens to arrest her. This cruel act triggers a top-secret investigation. Gabrielle is actually a state inspector in disguise, gathering proof of Lieutenant Stone's fake arrest ring. To break their wall of silence, she must find a hidden dashcam hard drive. Will Ranger, the K-9 police dog, show up in time to help her serve justice? 9 days earlier, Gabrielle Foster woke up at 4:51 in the morning. Her apartment on Linwood Street smelled like burnt toast and cold radiator metal. She had exactly $211.39 in her checking account. Her son Malik was 7 years old. He was autistic and loved counting bus numbers. Malik lined up his toy cars by color every single morning. It calmed him down. Gabrielle watched him do it. She never rushed him. She never once raised her voice. People at her second job called her quiet. Some called her slow. She let them. Nobody at the diner knew she carried a badge in her coat pocket every day. Nobody knew she worked for the Michigan office of the Inspector General. Her real assignment had nothing to do with alibi papers or her actual neighbor. Her real assignment was Lieutenant Marcus Stone, commander of the 15th Precinct. 3 families had filed complaints. Each complaint said the same terrible thing. Officers under Stone were arresting innocent people, then quietly dropping fabricated charges for cash. The department called it a rumor. Gabrielle's supervisor called it a pattern worth risking everything for. One complaint came from a warehouse worker named Devin Price, arrested for trespassing at his own job site. Devin paid $947 in fees before charges quietly disappeared 3 weeks later. Another complaint came from a grandmother named Ruth Palmer, arrested outside a grocery store for loitering. Ruth paid $612 before her case simply vanished from the court system entirely. Neither Devin nor Ruth ever saw a judge. Neither one ever got their money back. Both had one thing in common. Both looked poor enough for nobody to question the arrest. Gabrielle read both files twice before her first day undercover, memorizing every small, painful detail. She wasn't just chasing a case number anymore. She was chasing faces, names, real stolen dollars. Gabrielle herself had grown up 2 blocks from a precinct much like this one. Her own mother had once been arrested over an unpaid parking ticket she had already paid. Nobody believed her mother that night. Nobody checked the receipt folded inside her purse. Gabrielle remembered sitting in a plastic chair for 6 hours, swinging her legs, waiting for answers. She was 9 years old then. She never forgot how small that chair made her feel. That memory was the real reason she took this job, long before Whitfield ever recruited her. Her supervisor was a tired, careful man named Arthur Whitfield. He had gray hair, cracked reading glasses, and a coffee mug that never got washed. "You don't go in as an inspector," Whitfield told her 3 weeks earlier. "You go in as nobody. Poor, quiet, easy to ignore. That's your armor." Gabrielle nodded slowly. She understood something about being underestimated already. Whitfield slid a thin folder across his metal desk. Inside was a photograph of Stone. "He signs things without reading them," Whitfield said. "That habit will end his career." Gabrielle asked one question. "What happens to my son if this goes wrong?" Whitfield didn't answer right away. He just looked down at his hands. "Nothing will happen to him," he finally said. "I promise you that personally." It wasn't much of a promise, but it was the only one she had. During training, Whitfield taught her 3 simple rules for undercover fieldwork inside hostile buildings. Rule 1: never react immediately. Let people show you exactly who they really are first. Rule 2: cameras remember everything, even when people trust them completely, without ever checking. Rule 3: the loudest person in a room is rarely the most dangerous person present. Gabrielle wrote these rules on an index card and kept it folded inside her wallet. She read it every morning before Malik woke up, memorizing each line like a small prayer. By the 3rd week, she didn't need the card anymore. The rules lived inside her now. Detroit in October smelled like wet leaves and diesel exhaust from passing buses. Gabrielle's actual neighbor, an elderly widower named Samuel Reyes, had been arrested 3 days earlier. The charge was resisting arrest during what Samuel swore was simply a parking dispute. Gabrielle had watched the whole thing from her third-floor window at 9:17 at night. Samuel never raised his hands, never raised his voice. He just stood there confused. 2 officers put him on the ground anyway. One of them was Diana Lopez. Gabrielle wrote everything down that night, every second, every detail she could remember. This was her opening. A real complaint. A real reason to walk inside that precinct. Somewhere inside that same precinct, Lieutenant Stone kept a private ledger in his bottom desk drawer. The ledger tracked cash payments next to fake case numbers, written in his own careless handwriting. Stone believed nobody would ever question a lieutenant with 14 years of clean service. He believed his uniform and his rank made him untouchable inside his own building. He was wrong, though he wouldn't understand exactly how wrong for another 9 days. Every fabricated case shared one small detail Stone never noticed. Every camera kept recording anyway. On the morning of the incident, Gabrielle dressed exactly like she always dressed. A faded gray hoodie with a small hole near the left elbow seam. Sneakers with the sole peeling away from the toe on the right foot. No jewelry, no makeup, nothing that said money, status, or threat of any kind. She packed Samuel's alibi statement into a scuffed blue plastic folder from the dollar store. The night before, Gabrielle had worked her regular shift at Marlene's Diner on Grand River Avenue. She made $11 an hour there, plus whatever small tips landed in her jar. Her coworkers thought she just needed extra cash to cover rent and Malik's therapy sessions. None of them noticed the small earpiece she sometimes wore tucked beneath her hair. None of them knew Whitfield sometimes called during her break, checking on her safety quietly. That night, he called twice. Both times, she stepped outside near the dumpsters to answer. "Tomorrow's the day," Whitfield said. "Are you ready to walk into that precinct?" "I've been ready for 9 days," Gabrielle answered. "I just need one more piece of proof." She hung up, wiped down one last table, and walked home under flickering streetlights. At home, Malik was already lining up his toy cars in neat rows on the carpet. "Red, then blue, then red again," he said, not looking up from his careful arrangement. Gabrielle sat beside him, matching his quiet rhythm instead of interrupting his careful counting. "Tomorrow we're going somewhere important," she said softly. "You'll be very brave, okay?" Malik nodded without looking up, still moving cars into perfectly straight, patient little lines. She kissed the top of his head, breathing in the familiar smell of his shampoo. Whatever happened tomorrow, she thought, this small room would still smell exactly like home. Malik held her hand the whole subway ride, counting each stop under his breath. 7 stops, he whispered. 7 stops to the police station, Mommy. "That's right, baby," Gabrielle said softly. "You're always so good with numbers." The 15th precinct lobby smelled like burnt coffee fighting, with bleach and old carpet. A ceiling fan clicked once every 4 seconds, uneven, like it was tired too. Radiators hissed somewhere behind the front desk, a low mechanical breathing sound. Officer Diana Lopez stood behind the counter, boots polished, badge catching the fluorescent light. Her uniform was pressed sharp enough to leave a paper cut. She noticed everyone who entered. She noticed Gabrielle's shoes first, then the folder, then Malik's rocking body beside her. Something in her face shifted, a small curl at the corner of her mouth. "Can I help you?" Lopez said. It wasn't really a question. It was a wall. "I have alibi papers," Gabrielle said quietly. "For my neighbor, Samuel Reyes." "Reyes," Lopez repeated, flipping through nothing on her counter, stalling on purpose. Malik began rocking faster. He hummed the number 7 over and over. "Control your kid," Lopez said flatly, not even looking at him this time. Gabrielle's jaw tightened. Her knuckles went pale around the folder's cracked plastic edge. She said nothing back. She had learned, a long time ago, when to stay silent. Diana Lopez had joined the force 8 years earlier, proud of her spotless record. She believed rules existed to separate order from chaos. Nothing more, nothing less than that. She believed people who looked poor or tired or overwhelmed usually caused their own problems. Nobody had ever taught her to ask why a mother's shoes were torn in the first place. She had learned instead to read torn shoes as a warning sign, not as a story. That single habit of thought had cost other families dearly over the past several years. It was about to cost her something too, though she had no way of knowing yet. That silence seemed to bother Lopez more than any argument could have. She stepped around the counter, boots clicking hard against the cracked tile floor. She held her baton loosely, tapping it once against her open palm. "You people always come in here thinking we owe you something," Lopez said. Gabrielle held the folder tighter. Her heartbeat pressed against her ribs, quick and shallow. "I'm just trying to help my neighbor," she said. "That's all I want." Lopez smiled without warmth. Then she swung the baton toward the folder in one motion. The folder hit the floor. Papers scattered across dirty tile like startled birds. The room went still for exactly 2 seconds. Even the ceiling fan seemed to pause. Malik screamed, not from fear of the officer, but from the sudden noise itself. He dropped to his knees, covering his ears, rocking hard against the floor. Gabrielle knelt beside him instantly, blocking the room from his shaking body. "You're under arrest," Lopez said loudly, "for disorderly conduct and refusing an order." Every word landed clean and cold, the kind used to end an argument permanently. Other people in the lobby froze completely, staring down at their own shoes instead. An elderly man near the window stopped mid-sentence on his phone call, saying nothing else. A teenager waiting on a bench pulled his hood up, sinking lower into his seat. Nobody moved to help. Nobody wanted to become the next person Lopez decided to notice. The radiator hissed once, loudly, filling the silence nobody else in that lobby dared to fill. Officer Kevin Ruiz, chained to a K9 leash, watched from across the lobby. His dog, a large German shepherd named Ranger, sat perfectly still beside him. Ranger's ears rose. His nose lifted slightly. Something about the scene bothered him. Ruiz didn't move yet. He had seen Lopez do this kind of thing before. He had also seen what happened to officers who spoke up against her. So he stayed quiet, watching, his hand resting lightly on Ranger's warm back. Gabrielle looked up at Lopez from the floor, still holding her trembling son. "Please," she said, voice low and steady despite everything happening around her. "He's autistic." "Not my problem," Lopez said. "Should have left him home if he can't behave." Something cracked quietly behind Gabrielle's calm expression, invisible to everyone in that lobby. This wasn't about Samuel Reyes anymore. This wasn't only about her cover story either. This was about every mother who had ever been humiliated in a room like this. Lieutenant Marcus Stone stepped out of his office at that exact moment. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a uniform pressed sharper than regulation required. His watch alone cost more than Gabrielle made in 3 full months combined. "What's the holdup?" Stone barked, though his tone said he already assumed the answer. "Just another one causing a scene," Lopez said, not even turning to look at Gabrielle. Stone glanced down at her torn shoes, then at the papers scattered on the floor. He didn't ask her name. He didn't ask what actually happened here at all. "Get her out of my lobby," Stone said, already walking back toward his office door. He signed a blank incident report on his way past the front counter, without reading one word of it. That single, careless signature would matter more than Stone could possibly imagine that morning. Gabrielle gathered the scattered papers with shaking hands, keeping her body between Malik and the room. She said nothing else. She simply stood, holding her son, and walked toward the exit. But before she left, she looked directly at the ceiling corner near the front desk. A small black dome camera blinked there, quiet and constant, recording everything without judgment. Lopez hadn't even glanced up at it. She trusted the system she thought protected her. She had no idea that camera fed straight into the precinct's internal evidence server. She had even less idea who was already watching that server from the outside. Nobody in that lobby understood, yet how quickly 30 minutes could unravel 14 years of silence. Nobody understood that a torn plastic folder would soon become the most important evidence in Detroit. Outside on the sidewalk, cold wind hit Gabrielle's face as the precinct door closed behind her. Malik had stopped crying by then, exhausted, leaning heavily against her side on the concrete steps. A gray sedan pulled up moments later. Whitfield stepped out, face tight with barely controlled anger. "I saw the feed," he said quietly. "I saw everything, from the moment you walked in." Gabrielle nodded, still holding Malik close, saying nothing for almost a full minute. "This isn't just Stone anymore," she finally said. "This is bigger than one bad signature." Whitfield opened the car door for her, without another word, letting her set the pace herself. 3 hours later, Gabrielle sat across from Arthur Whitfield in a small government office. The room smelled like stale coffee and old paper, familiar in a completely different way. "They put hands on your son," Whitfield said quietly, reading her incident notes twice. "They put hands on a lot of people," Gabrielle answered. "Samuel wasn't the only one." Whitfield leaned back, exhaling slowly through his nose. "This changes our timeline," he said. "We move up the operation tonight, before Stone realizes what that camera actually recorded. Here is where most people would expect Gabrielle to explode with anger, finally. Instead, she sat perfectly still, hands folded, breathing slow and steady in the quiet room. Anger wasn't useful to her right now. Precision was. Patience was. Timing was everything. "I need the dashcam hard drive," she said. The one Stone thinks was destroyed. Whitfield slid a folder across the desk, thicker this time, filled with real evidence. "Word inside says Stone kept a backup," he said. "Hidden somewhere in that precinct. Somewhere only a very confident, very careless man would think was completely safe." Whitfield handed her one final item before she left his office that evening. A small silver pin shaped like a scale, the actual badge of her real rank. "You won't wear this tonight," he said, "but you'll carry it in your pocket." Gabrielle closed her fingers around the cold metal, feeling its weight settle against her palm. It felt heavier than it looked, the way truth always does right before it surfaces. That evening, Gabrielle returned to the 15th precinct wearing a different kind of quiet. Underneath her hoodie, a thin recording wire pressed cool against her collarbone. In her coat pocket, alongside the badge nobody there had ever seen, sat a folded warrant. She walked through the same doors, past the same coffee and bleach smell, completely unnoticed. Lopez was still on shift, laughing near the break room, unaware her whole world had shifted. Officer Ruiz stood near the K9 kennel area, Ranger resting his head against the cage door. Ranger lifted his head the moment Gabrielle walked past. His tail moved once, twice. Dogs notice things people miss. They notice fear that has learned how to hide itself. They also notice steady calm, the kind that doesn't smell like a threat at all. Gabrielle paused near the kennel for exactly 3 seconds, letting Ranger sniff her open palm. "Good boy," she whispered, barely audible, before continuing down the narrow hallway toward evidence storage. Gabrielle waited in a parked car across the street for almost 40 minutes first. She watched officers leave through the side door, counting each one under her breath, like Malik would. 9 officers left. Lopez wasn't among them. Neither was Stone, still working late inside. Her phone buzzed once. A text from Whitfield. "Confirm safe entry once you're inside." She typed back 2 words. "Going in." Then she slid the phone into her pocket. Cold air pressed against her face as she crossed the empty parking lot toward the side door. The evidence room door required a 4-digit code Gabrielle already had from Whitfield's contacts. Inside, rows of metal shelves held boxes labeled with case numbers in faded black ink. Dust sat thick on shelves nobody had cleaned in what looked like several years. Her flashlight beam moved slowly across labels, searching for anything connected to Stone's private cases. Nothing. No hidden drive. No obvious box labeled evidence of corruption for easy finding. Of course not. A man that careful wouldn't hide something so valuable in plain sight. She heard boots in the hallway. Heavy, deliberate, moving closer to the storage room. Her pulse jumped hard against her throat. She clicked off the flashlight immediately. The door handle turned. Gabrielle pressed herself flat against the shelving unit, barely breathing. It was Ruiz. Alone. Ranger's leash wrapped twice around his closed fist, tight with tension. "I know you're in here," Ruiz said quietly, not turning on the overhead light. Gabrielle's stomach dropped low and cold. Her cover, built over 3 careful weeks, felt fragile. "I saw what happened this morning," Ruiz said, voice barely above a whisper. I've seen Lopez do that before. To other people who looked poor enough to ignore. Why didn't you ever report it? Gabrielle asked, still pressed against the cold metal shelf. I tried once, Ruiz admitted quietly. Nothing happened. Stone buried the complaint in a drawer. This time there's a whole drive full of proof, Gabrielle said. That drawer won't hold this. Gabrielle stayed silent, weighing every possible outcome in the space of 2 heartbeats. I'm not here to stop you, Ruiz added. I'm here because Ranger won't stop pulling this direction. He nodded toward the far shelf, the one behind 3 unmarked evidence boxes stacked crookedly. Ranger sat down hard in front of that shelf, refusing to move another single inch. Behind the 3rd box, bolted beneath a loose shelf panel, sat a small black hard drive. Gabrielle's hands trembled slightly as she pulled it free, cold metal against her palm. Dust coated her fingers, dry and gritty, mixing with the cold sweat on her palms. The drive itself felt warm somehow, like it had been waiting there just for her. This was it. 31 days of dashcam footage Stone believed had been erased forever. Footage of fake arrests. Footage of officers pocketing cash from families desperate to avoid charges. Footage, most importantly, of Lieutenant Stone personally approving every single falsified report without ever reading them. Why are you helping me? Gabrielle finally asked, still holding the drive against her chest. Ruiz looked down at Ranger, who leaned his weight gently against her trembling legs. Because somebody finally needs to answer for what happened to your son this morning, he said. And because Ranger doesn't like people who hurt kids. Dogs are better judges than people sometimes. Ranger pressed his nose against the hard drive once, sniffing it like evidence itself. Then he sat back down, tail thumping twice against the cold concrete floor. Gabrielle allowed herself one small breath, the first full breath she had taken in hours. 9 days of watching, waiting, and staying quiet had led to this single small object. 31 days of footage, hidden behind 3 boxes, waiting for someone patient enough to find it. They didn't get to leave quietly. Footsteps echoed again, closer, faster, less careful this time. Lieutenant Stone stood in the doorway, blocking it completely, arms crossed over his broad chest. Evidence rooms closed after hours, he said slowly, especially for people who don't belong here. His eyes moved to the hard drive in Gabrielle's hand. His jaw tightened visibly. The color drained slightly from his face, one shade lighter with every passing second. That's precinct property, Stone said, stepping closer, his voice losing its usual confident weight. His hand trembled slightly against the doorframe, a small crack in 14 years of composure. You don't understand what you're holding, he added. That drive could ruin good careers. It already ruined careers, Gabrielle said. Devin Price, Ruth Palmer, Samuel Reyes. Should I keep going? Stone said nothing. His silence answered every question the hearing room would later ask officially. This is evidence of felony corruption, Gabrielle said, calm, steady, no longer bothering to hide anything. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her actual badge for the first time. Stone stared at it like the words on it belonged to a language he refused to learn. Michigan Office of the Inspector General, he read aloud, voice suddenly smaller than before. You've got to be joking, he said. The woman with the torn shoes? Really? The woman with the torn shoes, Gabrielle repeated quietly, watched everything you did to her today. Stone's hand moved toward his own duty belt, slow, uncertain, a decision forming behind his eyes. Ranger growled low in his throat, a warning sound that needed no translation whatsoever. Ruiz stepped forward, hand raised calmly. Don't, he said. It's already over, Lieutenant. Let it be over. For a long moment, nobody in that room moved. Even the vents seemed to hold their breath. Somewhere down the hallway, a radio crackled faintly, an officer requesting backup for something unrelated. Stone's shoulders dropped slightly, the weight of 31 days finally settling onto his chest. He didn't reach for his weapon. He simply stepped aside, silent, letting them pass by. The next 2 days brought quiet, careful retaliation from people still loyal to Stone. Someone left an anonymous complaint against Gabrielle's state inspector license, claiming falsified credentials. Whitfield handled it, within hours, providing documentation that shut the complaint down completely. Someone else called Gabrielle's diner manager, hinting she might lose her second job soon. The manager, unbothered by rumors, simply shrugged and kept her on the schedule anyway. Lopez herself tried reaching Gabrielle once. A single voicemail left late on a Tuesday night. "Please," the voicemail said. "I have kids too. Please don't destroy my whole life over this." Gabrielle listened to it twice, then saved it as evidence, along with everything else. She didn't call back. Some conversations only meant something inside a formal hearing room. 6 days later, a hearing room inside Detroit's municipal building filled with quiet, tense energy. Gabrielle sat at a long wooden table, wearing a plain gray blazer, hands folded calmly. Diana Lopez sat across the room, her once sharp uniform now wrinkled from 3 sleepless nights. Lieutenant Stone sat beside his attorney, staring at the same hard drive displayed on a screen. The footage played for the whole room. 31 days of proof nobody could argue against. Everyone watched Officer Lopez knock papers to the floor. Everyone watched her threaten an autistic child's mother. Everyone watched Lieutenant Stone sign a blank report without reading a single word of it. Devin Price testified next, describing the night he paid $947 to avoid trial. His voice shook slightly, but he kept talking, looking directly at Stone the entire time. Ruth Palmer testified, after him, her cane tapping softly against the wooden floor as she walked forward. "I'm 73 years old," she said. "Nobody should be afraid of police at my age." The room stayed completely silent after she said that. Nobody moving, nobody looking away either. Commander Young nodded once, writing something down, before continuing with the formal findings. Gabrielle watched Ruth Palmer sit back down, hands folded tightly in her lap. She thought of her own mother, waiting 6 hours in a plastic chair years ago. Nobody had listened then. Someone was finally listening now, in this quiet, crowded room. That thought alone made every risky, sleepless night of the past 9 days worth it. An internal affairs commander named Patricia Young read the findings aloud, slow and deliberate. "Officer Diana Lopez," she said, "effective immediately, your badge and service weapon are surrendered." Lopez's hands shook. As she unclipped her badge, the metal suddenly heavier than she remembered. She placed it on the table. It made almost no sound at all, just a small click. That small click felt louder than anything shouted in that lobby 6 days earlier. Lopez looked across the table at Gabrielle, her voice breaking slightly when she finally spoke. "I didn't know," she said. "I didn't know you were any of this." "You didn't ask," Gabrielle said quietly. "You just decided who deserved kindness before I said a word." Lopez had no answer for that. There wasn't one that would have mattered anymore. Lieutenant Stone's outcome was worse. Fraud charges, falsifying records, accepting payments tied to false arrests. His attorney requested leniency, citing years of service. The judge later disagreed, citing 31 days of footage. Stone lost his pension, his badge, and eventually his marriage within the same difficult year. Stone sold his house within 4 months, moving into a small rented apartment across town. His wife filed for divorce that same spring, taking their 2 children with her. He never once said the words, "If I had known who you were." He didn't need to. Everyone in that room already understood exactly what kind of man had been exposed. A man who judged people by their shoes had finally been judged by his own signature. Local news picked up the story within 2 days, calling it the 15th Precinct scandal. Reporters gathered outside the municipal building, cameras pointed toward the front steps every morning. Gabrielle refused every interview request, choosing instead to write a short public statement. "This isn't about me," her statement read. "It's about people nobody bothered to believe." Detroit's mayor announced a citywide review of arrest records the following week, citing this exact case. Other cities began quiet audits of their own precincts, worried about similar hidden ledgers. Nobody could say for certain how many more Devin Prices or Ruth Palmers existed elsewhere. But for the first time in years, people started asking the question out loud. Officer Kevin Ruiz received a commendation for his role in surfacing internal corruption evidence. Ranger received something better, in Gabrielle's opinion, an extra bag of dog treats every single week. Samuel Reyes had his charges dropped entirely, his record cleared, within 11 business days. He sent Gabrielle a small potted plant afterward, with a handwritten note that simply said thank you. Devin Price and Ruth Palmer both received refunds, $612 and $947. The state also opened a wider audit, eventually clearing 18 more falsified cases from Stone's ledger. Families who once felt invisible suddenly had a name, a date, and real proof behind them. None of it undid what had happened to them, but all of it mattered anyway. Whitfield told Gabrielle once that justice rarely erases pain. It only refuses to let it continue. The 15th Precinct started a new policy within 2 months, requiring 2 officers to witness any arrest report. They also started a small community fund, paying back families' wrongfully charged fees over the past 3 years. Officer Ruiz was promoted to sergeant, that winter, still walking Ranger through the same halls every morning. Ranger got his own small photo on the precinct's community wall, right beside a photo of Samuel Reyes. Kids from the neighborhood started stopping by just to pet him during afternoon patrol breaks. Nobody there ever forgot the day a mother in torn shoes changed how that building worked. 3 weeks after the hearing, Gabrielle returned to the 15th Precinct wearing her real badge. The lobby smelled the same, coffee and bleach fighting for space in that narrow room. But something about the room felt different now, lighter somehow, easier to breathe inside. A new front desk officer greeted her by name, offering Malik a small paper badge sticker. Malik pressed it carefully onto his shirt, counting the 5 points on its plastic star shape. 5 points, he said proudly. Mommy has 5 points on her badge too. That's right, baby, Gabrielle said, smiling for what felt like the first time in weeks. Ranger trotted over from the kennel area, tail wagging hard against the tile floor. Malik knelt down slowly, letting the dog sniff his outstretched hand before petting his head. Good boy, Malik whispered, copying the exact words he had once heard his mother say. Officer Ruiz watched from nearby, arms crossed, a small proud smile crossing his tired face. He's got good instincts, Ruiz said. Just like his mother, apparently. Gabrielle laughed softly, the sound surprising even herself, after everything the past month had held. Gabrielle didn't stay in Detroit forever. Her work moved her to other cities, other precincts. But she never forgot the sound of that blue plastic folder hitting cold, dirty tile. She never forgot Malik's scream, or Ranger's steady growl, or that small click of a badge. She used to think justice needed to be loud, dramatic, immediate, impossible to miss or ignore. Now she understood something quieter. Justice sometimes waits patiently in torn shoes, holding a folder. Justice sometimes wears an old gray hoodie and lets people underestimate it completely, right up until the end. Years later, Malik would tell this story back to her, adding his own small details each time. He always remembered the number 7 stops, and Ranger's tail, and his paper badge sticker. He never remembered being afraid. He only remembered his mother's hand, steady around his own. That, more than any hearing or headline, felt like the real ending of this whole story. Gabrielle kept one photograph on her desk in every new city she moved to afterward. It showed Malik petting Ranger, both of them smiling in front of the 15th Precinct sign. Whitfield had taken that photo himself the same day he handed over his retirement note. He passed away 4 years later, quietly, in his sleep, still keeping that same coffee mug nearby. Gabrielle spoke at his small memorial service, holding Malik's hand the entire time. He taught me that patience isn't weakness, she said. It's just strength waiting for its moment. Ruth Palmer attended too, leaning on her cane, nodding along with every single word. Devin Price sent flowers, along with a short note thanking Whitfield for believing him first. Samuel Reyes's plant, the one he had given Gabrielle years earlier, still sat healthy on her windowsill. It had grown taller every year, the same way her son had, the same way her courage had. Some stories end with fireworks. This one ended quietly, with a plant, a photo, and a promise kept. Arthur Whitfield retired the following spring, leaving Gabrielle a short note inside her final case file. You were never the woman with torn shoes, it read. You were the one holding the truth. Gabrielle kept that note folded inside her actual badge case, right next to Malik's paper star. Some evidence matters because a court accepts it. Other evidence matters because a mother never forgets it. Both kinds sat quietly together in that badge case, long after the 15th precinct case closed for good.